Hey, Flexy Bendy number 9. I'm going to show you the windshield wiper today. We're going to use this as the first drill in a sequencing of mobility drills for the hips done on the floor. You don't need anything except for perhaps yoga blocks, okay? Other than that, we're going to just stay on the floor for a bit for building into this sequence. And the windshield wiper is intentional. It is what I consider the most basic of all of these. It doesn't mean it's easy, and it doesn't mean that there isn't room for improvement if you already are familiar with it. So we will start with that and then build up the complexity, and hopefully end up with the two separate kinds of routines. One that's much more for can be done, anytime, more flowy, and one that's more dynamic and getting your heart rate up to be done as a mobility warm-up before a workout. If we have time at the end of this post, I'm going to give you some great tips about warm-up in general. For now, I'm going to show you, and then there's a lot to talk through. Believe me, because of the fact that this is number 1, there's going to be a lot that we're going to carry over into the next post, so pay attention to this one. Quickly showing you, it's not going to be, you're not going to be able to see until I talk through exactly what's going on and what we need to focus on. But the windshield wiper, like the name suggests, is taking those bent knees and moving them at the same time to drop them to the floor in this seesaw fashion, so it is more dynamic. As you can see, I'm not staying at the bottom position for more than 3 seconds at a time. All right, now that's the gist of the movement. There's a lot we need to talk through before you think, okay, this is not something that I need to do. Let me advise you, the fact that your hips our hips are the center of our body. If you do nothing but sit or lay down or stand, your hips are involved. If you feel pain already at your hips, the unfortunate thing about having pain at the hips that you don't know why, you're not exactly sure what is it. Sometimes it hurts when I do this, sometimes it hurts when I do that, it comes and goes. The source of hip pain, in order to actually correct it, is one of the hardest areas of the body to feel pain in, because of the fact that, like I said, it sits in the middle. Because of the nature of the way our body's connected in this kinetic chain, pain in the hips could be coming from your lower back, your mid back, your knees, your ankles, and anywhere around the hips, with the multitude of muscles that cross over all around that hip area. Okay, so versus if you were experiencing, let's say, lower back pain, then it's usually just a simple hip mobility or glute strength just below. If you're experiencing knee pain, it's mostly the hip, so just above, right? But if it's hip pain, it could be coming from above, it could be coming from below, in a multitude of areas. So when we're talking about hip mobility, we're not trying to become extra mobile. We're not trying to become extra flexible. Hip mobility refers to simply restoring the normal range of mobility that our hips are capable of, the normal range. So we have internal and external rotation of the hips. Whether you use them or not in your daily activities is beside the point. If you don't have that range, it's going to cause some issues. Not to be, doom and gloom, but because, I could be doom and gloom about other things too. Especially that whole upper shoulder, the upper body and the shoulder position situation. But, hey, if you're able to do the work that you're doing, which is mostly just at the computer, and you don't have to do overhead lifts, or you have somebody else reach stuff for you, okay, it's not going to be an immediate I mean, it's, I can't say none of it is not super important, okay? But you know what I mean? Like, even if you're not doing anything else with the shoulders, okay, you could still go about the day and just suffer the consequences of of what you can't do, all right? Because of the upper body position. But your mobility of the hips, it affects everyone. And then, of course, if you're actually doing exercises and loading it or going into extended ranges, then it becomes even more crucial. Like the deep squats, the heavy squats, the splits, anything like that. All right, so I want to also just address that getting down on the floor could be a limitation for a lot of people. So just make sure that if you are not used to getting down on the floor, I mean, it's just a byproduct of modern society, right? With all our cushy chairs and seats and driving and all of that, benches. We don't really sit on the floor or get down on the floor. So if you're not used to getting down on the floor, just practice that first, okay? So depending on where you are, you may have to do, getting down on quadruped first, or if you want to use a prop like the pole to get down into that hinge, to practice the hinge, get yourself down into that deep squat using that assist, okay? And then coming down on the floor, okay? But just get down on the floor safely, and then we will practice having just the actual setup first, if that's where you're at, and then we'll start building onto it, all right? Okay, I'm going to give you a warning now that it's going to be uncomfortable, and that discomfort will suck for a lot of people, and it'll suck for a little bit, but that's okay, okay? I just don't want you to be alarmed that it doesn't feel like a stretch, okay? It'll feel like a pulling, all right? So be warned, but if you feel that pull around your hips, that's fine. This is going to focus on internal rotation of the hips, which is not something that we work on unless we're very intentional about it. All right, so the first thing is you'll notice that my feet are fairly wide. So it's not just the feet and then the knees are knocked in. We're trying to keep this wide, and we have a alignment. So from ankle to knee to all the way up the thigh to the hip, you want to consider it to be one fixed unit. The other thing, the concept to understand as we do this movement is you want to then act as if these fixed legs are moving completely independently from your torso, okay? So we don't want to take our whole body with it as we turn. So get that concept down. Now, hand placement. Normally you will have a hand placement with the fingers pointing behind you in order to reinforce this external rotation of the shoulders. However, if you are double jointed like me, it might feel more comfortable to have your fingers pointing straight forward. If you find that being in this position doesn't allow you to be upright, but you keep wanting to relax into that mid-back, like I actually feel, then you want to do two things. Try just elevating onto your finger pads and pressing the finger pads into the floor to give you that elevated assist. And then the next level would be, and I like to use this regardless, is to just use the yoga blocks and press into the yoga blocks and use that elevation to give yourselves that proud chest, shoulders rolled down and back, your shoulder blades coming together in the back, or coming towards each other at least, okay? So that would be your initial setup. Now going back to the concept of moving independently of your torso, what I mean by that is that when we drop the knees together in the same time, in the same fashion, we want to remain chest straight forward, and we want to remain this shoulder position. So if you try to force this knee to the point where your shoulders roll forward like this, okay, then you want to put the precedence of the shoulders first, okay, and even if your knee remains higher to the ground. Once you are there, then you can intentionally try to press that knee down closer to the floor. But again, we're not holding for more than 3 seconds. We're just going to keep alternating. So coming back to center and then moving the feet together. Okay, so what we're working towards eventually is that this hip, okay, so your working leg remains on the floor, okay, or doesn't pop off, as much. Now, to remain on the floor, we're going to emphasize this chest coming forward, okay, to drive that chest forward is going to help keep that on the floor. And again, one side is going to be more difficult than the other, and it's a time to pay attention to that. All right, so we're just going to drill this for 2 minutes for now, so it's not a matter of reps. And if you find that you're squishing forward on the floor, that's okay. Just come back and reset when that happens, okay? So again, that sensation of the pull at the hip socket here on that working leg, which is the inside leg, meaning the knee that's closer to your midline, okay? That working leg, you will feel that uncomfortable pull. That's okay. As long as you keep doing it, you'll feel that loosen up a little bit, and then once we do this on a regular basis and start adding in all of the other types of movements, that is going to loosen up tremendously. Okay, so we have time to go over the warm-up talk. Normally, our warm-up is one main purpose is to simply warm our muscles, lube our joints, and get the blood flow going so that we're not doing a cold shock movement to our muscles for an exercise. But, and in that definition, almost anything will work, that we're walking in place, just moving around. Okay, we want to be a little bit more intentional and efficient with our time. So there's 2 types of warm-ups. Number 1 is if you're really short on time, then one of the best things you could do is do a ballistic style, where you're more bouncy and in a shorter range of motion or a reduced range of motion for the same type of movement that you're going to do. So for example, if you're going to do squats, to warm up for the squat, you could just stay at the top here and just do some pulsing without doing that full range of motion. So that would be an example of a very quick and dirty style of warm-up. The best warm-up, however, is if you work in mobility into the warm-up itself, and that you work in mobility for that specific workout. So ideally you have a full body workout, full body warm-up. But if you know you're going to be leg intensive, glute intensive, for example, then the hip mobility would be excellent. Not only because we're priming for the same movement, but because of the fact that once you have gains some mobility or flexibility, then you want to come back and reinforce that with the strength. Okay, so coupling that together is so much more efficient. Okay, so because you could stretch all you want, you could be do as many mobility drills as you want, but if you're missing that strength component, then it's not going to be permanent. It'll just remain temporary. So if you're able to then incorporate the strength into the move, which is what I often do, great. But if you want to separate it out and have just a really good mobility warm-up drill that then couples right into the strengthening exercises, then you are golden. All right, so give this a go.